Some games are about moving forward, some are about going on adventures, and a few are about nothing more complicated than keeping things tidy. Row after row, mistake after mistake, put in order, cleared away. On one of my shelves there's a grey Nintendo cartridge, so ordinary it's easy to overlook. No monsters on the label, no hero mid-jump. Just a title that became, for a lot of people, shorthand for calm. Tetris. You know this one. A tall, empty well, shapes falling from nowhere in a slow, polite rain. You turn them, slide them, fit them into place. If you do it right, the lines disappear. If you do it wrong, the mess climbs. For a certain kind of child, a game like that becomes more than a pastime. It becomes a ritual, a private place where errors can still be corrected and no one raises their voice when your hands slip, especially if the rooms outside the screen have their own ways of keeping score. The Boy in Tonight's story played on the living room floor after school, with notes on the counter, keys on a string, and a home so quiet some evenings that even the refrigerator sounded watchful. For him, Tetris mattered because it never seemed to hold a mistake against him. Until one afternoon, it stopped waiting for him to fix things himself. A line appeared where there shouldn't have been one, then another. Then something under the stack began to learn where he would leave the gaps. This is the memory he tells, years later, about an ordinary cartridge and the shape help can take when it starts rising to meet you from below. I call it
By the time I was 10, I could tell how bad the evening was going to be by the way the apartment sounded when I opened the door. If the TV was on and my dad was too loud at something canned and stupid, it meant he'd gotten home before my mom and was in a mood to narrate the commercials. If the radio was on in the kitchen and cabinet doors were closing just a little too hard, it meant my mom was cooking and trying not to think about work. If it was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the tick of the baseboard heater, that was the worst. That meant everyone was home and no one was talking. On those days, I didn't linger. I locked the door behind me, kicked off my shoes, dropped my backpack by the couch, and went straight for the Nintendo. We had one of those wood grain TVs with fake knobs on the side. The Nintendo sat on a low shelf under it, gray and square, with a controller cord that always wanted to knot itself. The games lived in a dented shoebox beside the stand, cartridges packed in sideways like books on a shelf. Tetris was the only one that felt like mine. The Super Mario still had my cousin's initials scratched into the back from when they owned it. Contra belonged to my dad, and he didn't like me playing it when he wasn't home. Tetris had shown up in a department store bag on a Tuesday in February. No birthday, no holiday. My mom had dropped it on the coffee table with a tired, "It was on sale," and gone to change out of her work clothes. I liked it right away. It didn't ask me to memorize maps or beat a boss or keep up with louder kids at school. It just gave me shapes and a place to put them. If I left a gap, I could work around it. If I stacked badly, I could dig back out. A clean line would flash and I'd feel my shoulders drop. Most afternoons followed the same script. Backpack down, note on the counter, TV on, cartridge in. Sometimes the note said, "Working late, left you lasagna, Mom." Sometimes it said, "Dinner in fridge, do your homework, Dad." I'd read it once, then again while the TV warmed up. The room always smelled faintly like old heat, dusty curtains, and somebody else's cooking from another apartment. By the time the title music started, the day had usually settled down with the controller in my hands. The first strange thing happened on a Thursday. I remember that because the apartment was so quiet it made every small sound feel staged. The refrigerator clicked on. Pipes knocked once in the wall. My own footsteps felt too big on the carpet. There was a note on the kitchen counter in my dad's handwriting, Late meeting. Mom picking up extra shift. Left you pizza money. I read it twice, set it back on the counter, and turned the lights off. The window had already gone blue-gray. The VCR clock glowed orange in the dark. I loaded Tetris. Level 0. Music 1. Always music 1. For some reason I played badly. Not by accident, just carelessly enough to feel the mistake happen. I dropped an orange LP sideways and left an ugly wound near the middle of the stack. Then I made it worse with a square. I leaned close enough to see the scan lines in the glass. And there it was. A new row. A perfect, flat row at the very bottom. No flash, no line-clear sound, no jump in the score, just there. I blinked hard. Another piece came down. I dropped it recklessly, almost daring something to happen again. Under the music, a tiny click. The bottom line flickered. A fresh pattern settled into place under the stack, fitting exactly where I'd left the gap. "Okay," I said, because the room felt too strange not to say something. The TV kept singing. The next night, it happened again. Then the night after that. Never on the afternoons when I played clean. Only when the stack turned jagged. Only when I left wounds in it. By the third day, I'd stopped pretending it was random. If I stacked well, nothing happened. If I slipped, the bottom of the well answered. At first, it only fixed the lowest row. Then it started filling pockets I hadn't reached yet, single squares appearing under overhangs, neat little bridges covering mistakes I'd barely finished making. Once it built a perfect tunnel 3 rows high, waiting for a long bar I hadn't realized I needed. The click came with it every time. Never loud, never exactly in rhythm with the game. A small sound under the music, like a fingernail against glass from the other side of a wall. After that, of course, I tried to break it. I stacked pieces in ways no real player would. I let chimneys form, buried holes 5 rows deep, left overhangs that shouldn't have been salvageable. Just before the whole thing should have topped out, click. The block appeared under an edge that had no business holding. Then another. A clean row formed under everything like a quiet hand pushing up from beneath the screen. I paused the game. The music stopped. In the silence, I could hear someone's TV downstairs and a faucet running in the next apartment over. Then, under all of that, one more click. Not from the speakers, lower than that, closer to the floor. That was the first time I turned the console off in the middle of a game and sat there looking at the dark glass instead of my own reflection. A few days passed, then a week. Winter started showing up in the window before dinner. The calendar on the fridge curled at the corners. Then came the school concert. It was just the 5th grade band, 3 songs, fold-out chairs, parents with cameras hanging from their necks. I'd been told both my parents would be there. I believed that right up until I was standing in the lobby holding my clarinet case and watching the crowd thin out around me. 5 minutes, 10, 20. They didn't show. A teacher finally drove me home. She made cheerful small talk in the car and kept one hand drumming the steering wheel, while I stared out the window and counted lit apartment windows so I wouldn't start crying. The windows of my apartment were dark. Inside, a note waited on the counter. "Mom's got you after the concert. Dad." And under it, in my mom's smaller, tighter handwriting, "Called in to work. Your father said he could make it. Food in fridge. Mom." I stood there just staring at the note. I don't know why. Maybe if I stared long enough, the words would rearrange into something else. I left the note and went into the living room. The Nintendo was already on. I stopped in the doorway. Nobody else was home, and Dad only touched the Nintendo on weekends. Seeing that red power light on made the room feel occupied. For a second, I expected to see someone sitting on the couch. There was no one there. I went room to room, turning on lights as I went. Bedroom, bathroom, kitchen. Nobody. I walked back into the living room. The TV showed Tetris already in progress. No score, no next piece box, no title. Just the well. It was half full. Not with the usual mess of a high-level game. Not random. Built. At first, I thought it was just another stack. Then the pieces started to line up into something I recognized. A double thick line across the bottom, a hollow space above it like a hallway, a heavier square to one side, and in the center, 3 figures. One taller, one shorter, a smaller one between them, half a block back. My hands went cold. The controller lay on the carpet where I always dropped it. The cord was already plugged in. I didn't remember doing that. I sat down because that was what I always did. The plastic was warm when I picked it up. The moment my fingers touched it, a piece spawned at the top of the well. I didn't press anything. It slid sideways on its own, turned and dropped into place. Another followed, then another. Rotate, slide, click. Each piece sharpened the image at the bottom, creating an impossible mural. A couch, the narrow strip of hallway, the little bulge in the wall where the plaster always looked swollen in summer. Our living room. The 3 figures rose line by line toward the center of the screen. The music had changed. It was slower now, stretched thin, as if the ribbon in a cassette tape had loosened. Underneath it, that click kept coming. I tried to lift my hands away. They stayed where they were. Not held there, just late, as if the rest of me were moving a second behind whatever had already decided to keep playing. The taller figure climbed. The smaller one stayed between them. The room at the bottom rose to meet them all. Then my parents' key turned in the lock. The door opened. Their voices came in with them, blurred together at first. Work talk, tired talk, something about traffic, something about the late shift. My mom saw my clarinet case leaning by the wall. "He's home?" she said. My dad stopped. "I thought you already got him. You said you could make it." The game did not pause. All I could hear clearly was the click, click, click under the music as the block room built itself into the room I was already sitting in. My mom started to say my name. Then she saw the screen and stopped. One hand rose to her mouth. The sound she made was small and cut short. "Turn it off," she said, then louder. "Turn it off now!" The next piece dropped. The smallest figure was one line from the middle of the screen. My dad stepped forward at last. "Jesus, when did you get home?" He looked from me to my mother, then back to the screen. He reached past me and hit the power switch. The picture vanished at once. No shrinking dot, no fade, just dark. For the first time in what felt like hours, the click was gone. I could hear my own breathing again. The room went back to being a room. The couch was just the couch. The TV was just a TV. The controller was slick in my hands. The VCR clock said 10:41. The concert had ended before 8. I remembered the teacher's car, the dark apartment, the note on the counter, the red power light. Between that red power light and my dad's hand on the switch, more than an hour had disappeared. Nobody talked about the TV. Not that night, not the next morning. My parents argued in the kitchen after I was sent to bed, then stopped when I came out for water. After that, the apartment settled back into its usual kind of silence. But the silence had changed shape. I didn't play Tetris again. The cartridge went back into the shoebox with the others. Sometimes I'd see the label and keep walking. Sometimes I'd hear the music in a commercial or out of a toy aisle speaker somewhere, and my stomach would tighten before I placed it. We moved the next year. Different apartment, different district, same cardboard boxes. The week we packed, my mom found the Tetris cartridge in the shoebox and held it for a second. She turned it over in her hand without looking at the label. "I don't think that game was ever very good for you," she said. Then she slid it under the manuals at the bottom of the box. That was all. She didn't explain what she meant. I didn't ask. But after that, I stopped telling myself I'd imagined the look on her face that night. Life kept going. I got older. New consoles came and went. Bigger apartments, other jobs, different couches. I learned how to laugh at the right time when people told stories at parties. I learned how to live with a little clutter in the room and a little noise in my head. Mostly, I stayed away from Tetris. If anybody asked, I said I was sick of it. That was easier than explaining why certain kinds of clean, empty space still made me feel watched. Years later, a friend put a controller in my hand at game night and said, "Come on, it's just Tetris." Different system, different apartment, people laughing in the kitchen, ice settling in a glass. One of those bright modern versions with backgrounds pulsing behind the playfield and music too full of itself to be soothing. At first, it was fine. Better than fine. My old habits came back faster than I wanted them to. Well on the right, long bar channel ready. Then I misdropped. Just a small mistake. A J-piece 1 column off. The kind of thing you just shrug off. The bottom row shifted, only 1 block, sliding sideways into the exact gap I'd left. No points, no line clear. Under the soundtrack, I heard it again. Click. Not from the TV, closer than that. Somewhere near the coffee table. My hands went cold around the controller. My friend laughed and said something about impossible luck. Someone in the kitchen laughed too. A cabinet door opened. The whole room kept being ordinary around me. I sat there with the next piece waiting at the top of the screen, and for 1 second I understood how easy it would be to let it keep going, to let the stack get a little worse and wait for the floor to rise again. Instead, I paused the game and handed the controller to my friend. He groaned. "Oh, you were doing great." "Yeah," I said and handed it over. "You take it." We spent the rest of the night playing stupid, messy things. Party games where everybody failed at once. Silly drawing games where nobody could tell what anything was. Co-op games where winning mostly meant shouting half a plan and committing to it together. Nothing fixed itself. Nobody played perfectly. The room stayed loud. That helped more than I expected it to. I still see Tetris around, on phones, on novelty machines at bars. Most of the time it behaves. Every so often, though, a piece lands a little too neatly. A gap closes itself in my head before I've decided how to solve it. For a second, under the ordinary noise of the room, I'll hear that tiny click again. Then the back of my neck prickles, like something far below the bottom of the well just shifted its weight and decided to let me fix it myself.
Some stories in the archive end with a thing still out of place. This one ends with a small correction. A controller passed to someone nearby, or something nearby. The boy you've just listened to grew up. The notes on the counter stopped appearing. The old Nintendo gave out. And slowly he learned that being carried is not the same thing as being kept. Even so, a few things stayed with him. The click under the music, the line that rose to catch him, that awful little relief of feeling something step in before he had to ask. You can call it a glitch if you want, a lonely child reading meaning into falling shapes, a machine misbehaving at exactly the wrong time. Perhaps. But I think the cruelest part was not what the game showed him. It was what it offered. a quieter room, a cleaner version of home, a place where something noticed when he slipped and moved to catch him before he hit bottom. For a child who had been forgotten, that must have felt almost merciful. Tetris is supposed to be honest. You make the shape, you live with it. You wait for the next piece and try again. So if the bottom of the well ever begins answering you before you've decided what to do, pause. Listen to the space you're in. Let it stay imperfect. Let somebody else stay in it with you. Because some things rise from below like rescue, and some only want to teach you how easy it would be to stop reaching back.